Hi guys, happy first day of spring break for many. It is Monday, April 6th, and I am coming to you with video number 7. I know that this is probably not how many of you expected to celebrate your spring break or upcoming Easter holiday. But I guess it is what it is, and we most definitely will have other holidays to come later this year that we will be able to celebrate just like we always did, and hopefully with a little more, since I know so many of us are really just dying to get back out there and to do things with our family and our friends, celebrate holidays, enjoy the outdoors, go shopping, go out to eat, you name it. And I promise you, it will come. We'll talk about when I think it's going to come, but it will come. And I just want to quickly say thank you so much for all of you guys who have been tuning in to these videos. I feel like I have my own little mini series going on right now. I do love hearing back from so many of you. It seems left and right, these videos really do help so many people, and that's why I continue to make them for you. Hopefully I am providing you with useful information that you can understand and that provides a little bit of peace and calm in a time where things seem to be changing so quickly, and we are really just in an unprecedented environment when it comes to dealing with this novel coronavirus. I do want to share with you guys quickly that all of my videos are on YouTube. They are uploaded under my channel, which is basically under my name. So if you search my name, you'll see a pink circle with a capital N, and all of the videos are there in case you want to share with any family or friends that are not on social media, or you just want to find all the videos in one place. You can look on YouTube. I also wanted to let you know that last week I had the chance to do my very first podcast with a friend of mine, Anna Marie Frank, who is the owner of a health and wellness company known as Happy Whole You. And you can find that podcast on the iTunes podcast or on your Android podcasts. And it is called Happy Whole You. And the date of that podcast was March 30th. And tomorrow, my very first radio talk show will also be aired, and that is with a great friend of mine from childhood. Her name is Reena B. Patel, and she is a child psychologist. Her radio talk show is called The Parenting Experiment, and it will be on Ruckus Avenue Radio, and I will put a post up about that. So if you like a little bit of what you've been hearing, there will be more available for you on those two platforms as well. So again, as I always do, I'm going to start with the numbers. And not surprisingly, you all know that the numbers are going up. And I'm sure you've heard in the news how this week is going to be bad, next week is going to be bad, brace yourselves, etc., etc. And in most places, the numbers are going to rise, and we expect a peak somewhere in the next 9 days, roughly around the middle of April. And these peaks that everybody is discussing is based on some epidemiological data out of the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation from the University of Washington Medical School. But something that gave me a ray of light, because I have been watching this epidemiological data from this site for a couple of weeks now, is that it seems that the peak, both in the United States as well as in California and all the other states that I looked at, has moved forward, which means that perhaps our peak is going to come sooner, which means that perhaps this will end sooner as well. I can't predict that for you, and I will talk a little bit more about when I think this will end, but it gave me a glimmer of hope when I saw that, because those charts and those numbers had not changed for days and days and days. And then when I looked at it this morning, it seems the entire country has moved forward. So again, like I always do, I commend those of you who are social distancing, who are taking this seriously, who are doing your part by staying home, encouraging your family and your friends to stay home, because it might just very well be working, and it might be working sooner than we know it. So the first question that I wanted to tackle is, what do you do if someone in your home is exposed or even infected? And I think the most important thing is to talk about that with your family now, to create a plan, because right now emotions are high, but they are not as high as when you get that phone call when someone tells you, by the way, I know you and I were in contact with one another 4 or 5 days ago, and now I have tested positive for COVID-19. So talk to those in your home and create a plan right now. I can't necessarily give you all of the details, but I can at least give you topics that you guys should talk about as a home. And as I just mentioned, the numbers are going up, so the numbers of exposures are going up. And we as a country, very obviously, we're not super well prepared for this global pandemic, and we are certainly trying our best to catch up with it, but you and your home certainly can be prepared. And that might provide you with a sense of control when there is really so little that we can control other than keeping ourselves at home right now. And more than likely what will happen is that there's one person in your home who tends to be going out the most. And perhaps it's because they have a job that includes essential services, or perhaps they are the designated person who goes out to get groceries and other essential items. And because they leave the home, there is a chance that they will come into contact with someone who has contracted the virus, and some 2 to 8 days after contact with someone who has tested positive, you guys are going to get this phone call that they in fact tested positive and they've been in contact with someone in your home. And so the things that I want you to remember as you sort of figure out a plan for your home and your family members is that the average time of exposure the average time that it takes to develop symptoms from COVID-19 is 5 days after the exposure. So if someone that you or your family member was in contact with 8 days ago calls and tells you that they have tested positive, you have a little bit of time on your side. It doesn't mean that you're going to not get the symptoms for sure, because we know the incubation period is 14 days, but you do have a little bit of time on your side, as I said, and you've got 6 more days to watch and wait. You will shed the greatest amount of virus when you are symptomatic. It doesn't mean that you don't shed the virus when you are not symptomatic, but there is more happening once you start to feel symptoms such as fever or cough or shortness of breath. So the things that you should talk about with your family is that, will that person who is exposed live somewhere different? Do you have an option for either that person to go somewhere else, or would you and your children go somewhere else? Or would you choose to isolate the person who has been exposed perhaps to one section of your house or one room of your house so that there isn't as much spread through the house? And how you answer these questions really depends on the circumstances at home. Do you have someone who's elderly at your house? Do you have someone who's immunocompromised at your house? Is there a pregnant soon-to-be mama at your house? Do you have a newborn there? Obviously, if you have those types of individuals in your house, you are going to err on the side of being much more vigilant in how you separate the person who's been exposed from others in the house. Another option is to have the person who is exposed wear a mask at home for 14 days after the time of exposure. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because those masks can definitely help to reduce how much of the virus that particular person could shed if he or she in fact has become infected. So like I said, I can't necessarily answer this question for every single person's individual situation, but I think it's important to have this discussion at home before fear starts to run really high and after you've received that phone call. And of course, it's a similar type of conversation that you would have within your own home if someone were to be infected, but obviously you're going to be much more aggressive in terms of your precautions, because now you know the person does in fact have the virus and has obviously had enough of symptoms to seek medical care, which means they're shedding a higher degree of the virus. I want to talk a little bit more about masks because I did find some information that I thought would be very useful to you. And as you know, it is really becoming sort of the norm now that when you go out, you should wear a mask. This does not mean to hoard the masks from the healthcare workers, because as you know, many of them are dealing with actively infected patients who are very sick, and they need to do what they can to have their own protective equipment. But there are so many homemade options available, and that's what I really see a lot of the community wearing, and I think that's wonderful. This is something to primarily wear when you leave the house in order to obtain your essential items. Again, we shouldn't be leaving the house for non-essential items, but obviously we need to eat. So there is going to be a time when you leave the house, and this type of mask can be very useful. Something else to consider is that if you are an essential worker, you might want to start wearing these masks to work the entire time, because quite honestly, if your coworker becomes infected and they call you again 2 to 8 days after they know that they have tested positive, you might have a better sense of well-being knowing that you were wearing your mask at the time that you were in contact with them. And in terms of what type of masks, a lot of people have been making simple cotton masks, and these are wonderful, but they are very permeable, particularly to a virus as small as this, which is 0.125 microns. I know some excellent seamstresses are also adding HEPA filters in there, but those can often be a bit suffocating. So when you're breathing, it's starting to get hard to breathe because the air isn't moving in and out as well as you would normally expect it to. And so there was a wonderful article on Business Insider that my good friend Natalie recently showed me. And what they used to create the mask was a double layer of those blue shop towels that are found at hardware and automotive stores or websites. And if you double layer it, then apparently it can actually filter out up to 0.3 microns, which is exactly what an N95 mask is doing. And so you may ask, well, if your mask is only protecting against particles that are 0.3 microns or larger, and this virus is 0.125 microns, well, it's going to get through, right? And the answer is possibly yes, there is a chance it can get through. But the analogy that I would make is if you have a chain link fence and you're throwing marbles at it, a lot of the marbles aren't going to get through because they're going to hit the metal part of the chain link fence and they're going to fall to the ground. And that's the purpose of the mask. We at this time do not have any technology that can filter beyond or further past 0.3 microns. So this may be another way to sew a mask, is using these blue shop towels. And I will provide the link on this information in the comments as well, if that's something that you're interested in doing. I do want to answer this question again because lots of people keep asking, can you get this virus twice? The general presumption is probably not, but we don't know for sure yet. It does seem that COVID-19 is very similar to other viruses like chickenpox or measles or roseola, where once you get it one time, you are immune. But again, we don't know for sure. Antibody testing tends to answer those questions for us the best, and we do now have some antibody testing that is available in the United States, so I think we'll start to get some answers from that. But there were cases in Japan and China where individuals tested positive, their symptoms resolved, and then they tested positive again. What I could not find with those individuals was, did they have a negative test in between that time? So in order for you to truly be deemed clear of the virus, you need to have 2 negative tests 24 hours apart. And I don't know if these individuals were truly considered cleared from the virus and then tested positive, or if that second positive was really just a prolonged viral situation for that person. So that question really still remains to be determined. But again, the experts in the field seem to think at this point that hopefully one and done will be the situation. And last but not least, I wanted to talk about, when will this be over? And you guys, nobody knows. There has been speculations of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 2 months. Maybe the weather will do it. And honestly, we just don't know right now. As I mentioned, the fact that the peak has moved up a couple of weeks to me is a reassuring sign that perhaps this will end sooner than later. But I think the most important thing right now, honestly, is to not focus on the finish line. It's to focus on the day by day. As I mentioned in my last video, if you're that type of person who, when you're sitting at the airport and they tell you, okay, your flight is delayed by an hour, and you say, okay, no big deal, I can wait an hour, and then in an hour they tell you 2 hours, and then in 2 hours they tell you 4 hours, and at the end of those 7 hours you are absolutely enraged. Why couldn't they have just told you 7 hours from the beginning? That's kind of what this situation is like. And so I really wouldn't hold it to a timeline. I think that we are all down for the count for this month of April for sure. If I had to estimate, I would say it's going to be at least a month after we hit our peak before we can start to release some of these social distancing guidelines. Because if we release too quickly, just immediately after the peak, then of course we're going to go right back into the peak. So we really need to wait and continue doing what we're doing until we see a steady decline in the number of new cases on a daily basis. And so I just think it's very, very important right now, and I hope some of my talk demonstrated this, to control what you can. I've talked to a lot of you guys, and many of you are anxious about this situation, incredibly so, and understandably so, because a lot of this is out of our control. And I personally feel it every morning. It's just kind of that heavy, sinking feeling when I wake up, like, what am I going to do today? And when can I have a day where I wake up and I go back to normalcy? And my advice for you, if you feel like I do, is to find a routine. It's okay if it's on a pretty lax schedule. You don't need to be up and at it as early as you were when we were all back at work and before this virus started. But get up. Get out of bed. Change from your nighttime PJs into your daytime lounging PJs. Be sure to do some stretching, meditation, do a devotional, practice gratitude, something in the morning that helps you look forward to the day that is coming. And for me, I tend to choose three things from the day before that I am grateful for. And recently, it's been things that we didn't necessarily have time for before this started, like going on walks and playing Monopoly. And then I choose 1 or 2 things that I want to get done that day. And folks, these are not big tasks. We're talking get my video out or do the laundry for the bed sheets, simple things. So at least at the end of the day, I can say I got 1 or 2 things done, and that makes me feel a little bit better about these days that seem very long and the fact that we don't know when this is going to end. It's a good idea to keep your meal time sort of somewhat scheduled around when you would normally eat. Again, it provides a little bit of structure to your day, and structure is important when it comes to our mental health and wellness. I mentioned it before, but limit how much you read and watch about all of this coronavirus, because it can certainly suck you in. It is a rabbit hole if I have ever seen one, and that is only going to increase your angst and fear if you continue to just keep reading and watching and reading and watching. The news is somewhat accurate, I guess, but again, their job is to entrance their viewers as well, and so they try to make it as flashy and as exciting and as emotional, I think, as they can, because they want you to keep watching, because at the end of the day, they too are a business. Maybe find one source that is good for you. I know that I really like the New York Times briefing or CNN's briefing, so I read that in the morning, and then I try to put it away. I try not to read too many articles on social media after that, because again, it just tends to bog me down, and I don't know that it's necessarily helping me any. The most time that I read about it is honestly after I get questions from you guys and I start to prepare for the next video. So we're in it for the long haul, guys. The long haul might just be another month. It might be 2 months. I don't know. But honestly, our mental health through this process is going to dictate how we recover from this process. And just remember, we as a human race have recovered from some amazing feats. from other pandemics for sure, from depressions, from recessions, from wars, and we are going to recover from this as well. I know sometimes the news makes it feel like we're not going to, and that everybody is going to be sick and dead before this is over, but that is not the truth. We will survive from this. This too shall pass. And again, you guys are absolutely doing your due diligence by social distancing, and so you're making a difference in that process. All right, guys, that's it for video number 7. I hope it was helpful. Talk to you soon.